All right, guys, we'll be with you in just a minute here. Good morning. Good morning. Hey, while y'all are waiting for my intro to run, open yourself up an extra window and go subscribe to the Fit Life with Danielle so you don't miss her new. It's Monday, so you don't want to miss her new vlog this morning. So let's did that. And good morning. I see His Majesty isn't sleeping on the job. 0530 over in Anaconda. Indeed. Let me zoom the camera in and get it's still on the Cameron's here angle, and well, he's not. So, good morning, everybody. I see GCM. I already said good morning to a few of you guys. I see Patrick and Fish and Golf. And I gotta give some love out there to the Fit Life with Danielle, because first blood, baby, first blood. Patrick asks if we're gonna do any coverage of Oliver Anthony. You know, that I might have to talk about that a little bit later. I had considered that as the primary topic this morning, but I think on the face of it, the topic's a little shallow for a full show. It is, however, I think very interesting that Oliver Anthony was offered a $10 million, not sponsorship. Yeah, sponsorship, a $10 million deal with Bud Light, and he turned him down. He said he wasn't going to go woke and go broke. But that might be, maybe I need to do a short on that one. So, what I do want to talk about this morning is some stuff that's happening on TikTok. Over the last week, there was a viral trending video on TikTok that appears to be a Chinese psyop. And, man, they really just don't want you having babies. Like, they hate the idea of America having babies. And if I'm being fair, you can't blame them. I mean, China's in trouble, guys. We hear a lot of noise about the threat that China is as an enemy. We hear a lot of noise about the danger represented by the enmity that we might face between a united Russia and China. The fact is, Russia and China are both in a lot of trouble. Their economic situation is not strong, and China, even more than Russia, is suffering from severe national collapse level sub-replacement birth rates, and that is only exacerbating the acceleration toward collapse, because basically they've got too many old people living off of too many young people. I'm actually surprised that we didn't hear more conspiracy theories surrounding the COVID pandemic when it became very clear that a lot more. So it primarily affected people. It primarily affected old people. Some like 75 to 80% of all COVID deaths were people who were beyond the age of expectation. Right, so wherever they lived, they were older than the average expected lifespan, and that's without even taking into account the various mitigating comorbidities available. But it wasn't just that we saw primarily old, sick people dying from COVID, and there was a whole lot of conversation around the idea that the people who were listed as dead from COVID and dead with COVID were two different categories, and there's a lot of truth to that. In fact, many of the COVID death rates and related data have been amended very quietly, but they have been amended to, shall we say, better reflect the true numbers there. We talked about it a bit before they started cracking down on COVID information, and I did say information, but early on there were a lot of stories about people like, oh, he was killed in a motorcycle accident, but he also had COVID, and therefore that was the cause of death, not the decapitation or the self-deletion or what have you. And you look at, back to my point about China being in collapse. I'm amazed that there was not more conspiracy theory about surrounding the fact that where you saw mass die-offs related to COVID were places like New York City, China, parts of California, places where, because of strong social engineering policies, heavy communist and socialist influence, you have a severe problem stemming from an aging population with below replacement birth rates, where there are not enough young working taxpayers to support the cost of the ever ballooning Social Security net that's laid out to support the unproductive elderly. And so I thought it was pretty obvious that we should be incredibly suspicious of there suddenly being a magic disease that solves the problems of communism. Well, one of the things that the Chinese are worried about now is a strong America. And we've seen many, many things where there are clear attacks on the American family unit. The clear objective, because the American family unit is the base foundation. This is just not just an American thing. The family is the most foundational basic building block of any civilization, period. Right? You get far enough back to get to pre-feudalism, and you're talking about clan organization. Clans are groups of families. A family is a group of people. So a family is a group of people that are so designated by their immediate genetic relationship. A clan is a group of people who are so designated by their extended genetic relationship. Right? So mommy and daddy and the kids, and then, the cousins as groups of mommies and daddies and kids. Right? That's family to clan. And that, that's how you build out to kingdoms, to feudalisms, to nation states, and eventually to the various types of pseudo one world government subcategories that we suffer under today. China's big concern is that America has a strong tradition of family values. And a large part of what it means to be a conservative is to value your family. Right? We've mentioned it on the show several times. Cameron and I both have 4 kids. Making babies is good for you. It's not just good, clean entertainment. It's good for your soul, man. I cannot over exaggerate that. I cannot express that strongly enough. So, thankfully, the audio on this doesn't matter because I'm still struggling with whatever the problem with the audio is. I'm gonna let the audio play in hopes that it gets through the mixer. Y'all let me know if it does. And here it comes. I'm gonna play this video for you. Okay, so y'all let me know if you heard the sound. Like I said, the audio for that little clip doesn't really matter so much. It's just a silly little song playing in the background. But and so I'm gonna let this keep playing on a loop if I can while I talk about it a bit. So every time she goes to put her finger through the ring, right? She has this terror flash to working, right? Oh my God, if I put on this ring, okay, thanks guys. So you're not getting audio. The audio on that is off now, so it doesn't matter. But every time she tries to put her finger through the ring, she has this flash. Oh my God, working in a house, washing dishes, like this chick just hates the idea of living in a clean house. Let me ask you a question. Are we expected to believe that if you don't get married, you don't do any cleaning? Is that the premise we're working on here? So the only thing that happens in there that a woman should be concerned about with relation to being married is the pregnancy part. And I'll get back to that in just a second. We talked about this before and the importance of the joining of two peoples. You're not a complete adult if you are not complete in marriage. You're missing half of you. Now, in a very practical economic sense, what I mean by this is as an individual, an unmarried single individual, you have a household. Even if that household is just a cracker box little townhouse in the city that you go home to, a flat, a one-bedroom apartment, a studio, whatever, your tiny little corner of the world, you still have that space which requires maintenance, right? You need to clean your space. You need to cook for yourself, right? Somebody has to clean the house. Somebody has to cook the food. Somebody has to take out the trash. Somebody has to call the repairman when something goes wrong. Be there to let the maintenance guy in when he has to be ordered, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. As an incomplete person, you have to go to work, do your job, earn the living, earn the revenue that funds the household, and do all of the maintenance in the household. So you got a single guy and a single woman, and they're both dealing with with all of the problems of having to provide for themselves and having to maintain their household. Or you can combine that situation and divide that labor. And traditionally, the most sensible division of that labor is one of you goes to work and does the earning most of the time, if not all of the time, while the other keeps the household. And if you're talking about living in your 1 or 2 bedroom apartment, once you've got that first kid, mommy might be doing all the work. You're not going to find a lot of couples where you're actually in a house, white picket fence, 2.5 kids, 1.5 cars, yada da, and daddy doesn't do the yard work or hire a yard man. I know my buddy Steve told me on more than one occasion he'd quit drinking beer before he'd fire his yard guy. And now that I've got a yard guy, I can't say I disagree. And I mean, I still have to do. All right, I'm going to give you that one, Xander. Xander Max says my room was complete me. Yeah. Xander Mack's gonna make do with some Roombas and a fleshlight. Good for you, my man. But I tell you what, it is cheaper to keep her. But now, in fairness, my Uncle Bobo used to say, you know why divorce is so expensive? Because it's worth it. But, I mean, seriously, my wife and I have been married for nearly 20 years. Now, she is not the trad wife in the way that somebody like Estee Williams is. But she is a homemaker. She stays home with the kids most of the time. I stay home and watch the kids while she goes and does the Navy stuff, etc. You get like the Estee Williams, and there's this whole aesthetic going on where she dresses like a 1950s housewife and does the dishes and all that. But like, this girl is making a living off of doing social media videos about being a 1950s styles trad wife. And there's actually a lot of value there, because she's a very popular social media influencer, and the message of her influencing is get married, have babies, and raise a family and be happy, right? And don't bog your mind down with leftist poison. So there is great value in having the partner, in having that division of labor and being good to one another and defining those roles. Now, I've even got some buddies out there who are stay-at-home husbands while mommy goes to work and makes more money. And not my game, not the play I want to make. And I can go back to the whole thing with the caves, and you don't send the boobies to hunt the mammoth, right? That's hardwired. That's natural selection. But if that works, it's a hell of a lot better than being a single parent. And let me remind you, fatherless homes are the number one predictor of probable future incarceration and criminal activity. That's fatherless homes, not one-parent homes, specifically fatherless homes. Homes with a father and no mother actually have a slightly lower propensity to incarceration and criminal activity than homes than two-parent households. But there are a lot of other negative outcomes there, quite separately. Now, I want to kind of wrap up on. I'm going to take you through this Daily Caller article on that video, and then I've got another article that I want to touch on as we wrap up. So there's a viral TikTok that shows a girl putting on an engagement ring and seeing her future as a miserable housewife. Like, for real, honey. Are you going to stay single forever and continue to do laundry and cleaning and et cetera, and still have to go to work? Like, that's your option, right? Okay, we'll see if I get back to the article or not. But that's your option, right? Let me take you back to the time before the feminists ruined everything for you. The question was never, are women allowed to work? Right? You go back to the beginning of the Industrial Revolution, and single women were absolutely working. They were plucking chickens, they were sewing, they were working in what we would now consider sweatshop conditions. Single women were working. Getting married was your ticket to stop doing that. But guess what? For the gentleman that married you and got you out of those shitty conditions in exchange for keeping the house, he still had to work in similar shitty conditions. Like, you might have been plucking chickens when you met your coal miner, but he gets to keep going back to work where he has to crawl for 2 miles just to get to the mine. That's his daily commute. is 4 miles of crawling, right? And so it was never a question of whether or not women were allowed to work. It became a question of whether or not women could be forced by the necessity of the situation to work. It became a question of whether or not a corrupt governmental institution could convince women that they should be forced to engage in work, whether they wanted to or not, by dire economic situations, with the result of making those economic problems more dire by artificially inflating the workforce supply without an inflationary result in workforce demand, thereby suppressing wages, all the while applying additional taxes to the earning of your income. Incentivizing women into the workforce was an intentionally evil maneuver. Prior to the whole rise of feminism, even the 19th Amendment, prior to that, it was a choice. You could choose it. Now it's an objective, and one that is getting further and further away for a lot of people. It's becoming more and more difficult for young people to not have to choose to be a dual income household. This is not a positive development. And communists love that. For one, because it's a great way to take your children away from you and cram them into these government institutions. Xander says, do you not think it's possible to have a fulfilling relationship outside the bounds of marriage? It's only a man-made religious doctrine. It doesn't bring anything tangible to the relationship. Okay, that's, you know what, I'm glad you asked. In part, my wife and I got married when we did for practical reasons. We were co-stationed at a military base and had been together for a little over a year and a half, and had been together, and we were coming up on the end of our time at that particular duty station, knowing that when our PCS orders came, she would be going to one base and I would be going to another. And I did some math there, and I asked myself this question. I know that marriages like this, you know, we met at DLI, and there are a lot of jokes out there about military couples that meet at DLI. They get divorced at Goodfellow. It's the next duty station. And I asked myself this question, essentially, is the risk of a nasty divorce worth the possibility that I'm right? I really do love this woman and she loves me, and we really can have a wonderful life together. Is that reward worth the risk of a potential nasty divorce that results from us not being able to get to be co-located? You know, it would drive me insane to be married to my wife and never be allowed to see her, you know, basically forced by the government never to be able to see her. We were geographically separated for about a year, almost immediately after we got married. But because we were married, because we had that paperwork between us, there were some things that I could do within the confines of the Uniform Code of Military Justice to get us more permanently co-located. And we were separated for another year when I was deployed to Afghanistan, but that's, you know, obviously I didn't want to take my wife and brand new baby into the war with me. So that was just a matter of the mechanics of military service. And so I do accept, I certainly do accept that if what you're doing is the activity of being married, right? I don't exactly go to church every Sunday, Xander Mack. So the religious doctrine of marriage is not terribly significant to me. I have found the use of the legal doctrine of marriage to be very practically utilitarian for me and have taken advantage of that. And I would go so far even as to say that absent the circumstances of our military service, I would not feel a need to have either divine or federal acknowledgement of the relationship that I have with my wife for us to have the relationship that we have. I'd be perfectly happy just being with her for the rest of my life and no paperwork between us. And that's actually been a topic of conversation for us on more than one occasion. There was very much a grounded and practical reason for us to get married when we did. On a less practical note, I will say that a big wedding is a hell of a good time. It's good for morale, it's good for the spirit, and that's for everybody in attendance, right? You know, seeing two people become complete together, and you know, quite separately from the religious doctrine, quite separately from the federal interference, quite separately from the concerns of law, the ceremony, the ritual of making a declaration, taking an oath, entering voluntarily into a contract with one another before a crowd of witnesses from whom you are getting all of the hope and support and well wishes that you could possibly hope for, is in and of itself an extraordinarily valuable endeavor. If you are in a fulfilling relationship and don't intend to go through the process legally, etc., of marriage, I would highly recommend that you have some sort of ritual or ceremony that is a large celebration of your individual dedication to one another. I think that is a thing. You know, no matter how you dress the occasion in God or in religion or in government, etc., do the spaghetti monster thing. I don't care. I'm saying that to ritualize and formalize that relationship in a ceremony with people you love, people who love you, is in and of itself an extraordinarily valuable thing. So I hope that's I actually feel like your question, Xander Mac, is an incredibly important one, and I hope that answer is a usefully complete one. So yes, I do think you can have a fulfilling relationship outside the bonds of marriage, but the voluntary entanglement of that individual contract is itself a thing of great value, which should not be ignored or diminished, whatever your concerns are. Now, I would also go so far as to say that under the current legal paradigm, there is much more incentive for a woman to get married than a man. As a man, getting married right under the current legal system, in the no-fault divorce system, you're essentially guaranteed that as a man, you will be stripped of your property in the event of a divorce. The vast majority of all divorces are initiated by the woman, and the vast majority of all divorces end in the man having half of his property stripped from him by the government if he hires a very good lawyer and is very lucky. For a man, it's all risk. Excuse me. It is great reward, but the man bears all the risk in a marriage. So, it's already 8 o'clock, so I'm not going to dig back into the article. I pretty much covered everything the article's going to talk about. So I'm going to go ahead and wrap it up there. Xander Max says, I agree. I think making vows to each other absent the government's permission means probably more. Agreed. See, and like I was saying, a large part of the reason that my wife and I got married when we did, and I'm not saying that we would not have gone through with the ceremony and the marriage itself, but the timing of it also had a lot to do with my concerns about where the Army and the Navy were going to stick us after we finished at the duty station that we were at, which is going to make it more it would have made it more difficult. In fact, the numbers tell me that if we hadn't gotten married when we did, then the likely case is that we never would have seen each other again. Not that we would have broken up, our relationship would have ended nastily, et cetera, that she would have gone to where the Navy sent her, and then I would have gone away to where the Army sent me. In fact, I happen to know reliably that instead of us being co-stationed at the same duty station in Hawaii when we were, instead she would have been in Hawaii and I would have been in Korea for at least the 2 or 3 years between the time that she got to Hawaii and I went to Afghanistan. So that was tricky. Plus we had a big fucking wedding at the lake house that was just awesome, with a live band and my cousin the judge, and I mean it was, we had a $20,000 wedding for about $30. That's a little bit of an exaggeration of the difference, but we had a hell of a great wedding for a very reasonable price because we just happened to have stuff and people. So I'm gonna go ahead and put a pin in it there. Thanks for watching this morning, guys. We love you, and we will see you tomorrow.